Good afternoon. My name is Ed Kuiper, Systems Architect with Nutanix. Today we are going to review deploying Nutanix Mine with Veeam. The first thing we'll do is log into Prism Element, where we'll need to create a VM, and that VM will be the foundation VM for Nutanix Mine. So as we go in and create this VM, we're going to give it 4 vCPU and 4 gigs of memory. And then we are going to clone that from an image we already have on the system, and that is the foundation for mine. We'll choose the network, and then we'll go ahead and power that on. Once it's powered on, the next thing we'll need to do is create some DNS records so that we can map a host name back to an IP address, since in this demo I am not going to join Veeam to the domain. So you'll see that we'll go into this auto AD, which is a domain controller, and we'll go in there and we'll make those suggested changes. So now we're in auto AD, and we're going to log in, and we'll open up DNS, and we're going to just create the A records for the VMs that we are going to build in this environment using this foundation process. So you'll see there's going to be 3 A records being created right now. Each one of those is for a Windows-based VM that Veeam will use. And then later on, we'll add 3 more for the Linux-based. And these are really for the storage repositories that Veeam will use on Nutanix storage architecture. And again, this foundation process will create a scale-out solution so that as you need additional capacity, you can add additional nodes to grow the capacity. All right, so we're just filling this out now. And then by the time we're done here, we should be able to go back and launch the foundation VM, where we'll be able to see the IP address that was used, and then we'll be able to launch a browser and open the web console for the foundation VM and proceed with the install. So what's really important here is that with this Mine appliance, everything is consolidated into these 4 nodes to start for you, meaning that your compute and your storage, your networking, your hypervisor, and your backup software is all in this siloed system for ease of management and really rapid time to value, being able to deploy very quickly. If you were to compare this to setting up 3-tier architecture and then deploying Veeam manually, we're going to be able to accomplish our deployment much faster than a traditional deployment. So I've launched um, the web UI where we'll log in. It's going to prompt me to change my password. And this is the foundation process that Nutanix has built to integrate in with Veeam to really simplify the Veeam deployment on the Nutanix platform. Once we're logged in, we can click Setup. We'll just follow the prompts here to accept the EULA. Right here, we are going to add in the Nutanix cluster or Prism element IP address, username, and password. And we're going to go to Next. It's going to search for that, make sure it can authenticate in. And once it does that, we will then set up some additional parameters for that cluster. Again, all of this is needed for the foundation process to function. So now we're entering our controller virtual machine username and password. Each host has a controller virtual machine, and in this deployment we have 4 hosts. All right, I may have typed that password incorrectly, so let's go ahead and retype that in. And click next. There we go. All right, now it's going to ask for our Server 2019 ISO, and that's going to be used to build the Windows servers that are needed for our storage repository or scale out repository. Next thing we'll do is upload our license for Veeam. Again, you can bring your own license. We're going to choose the network that we're going to deploy on, or the network that we'll use for our appliance VMs. And again, we created those DNS A records. So you'll notice that as I put in the first IP address, all the IP addresses uh, flowed below. So you'll see we'll have the Linux servers and the Windows servers down there. But let's just continue to fill out the information here, and then we'll double check to make sure that we've got everything lined up properly as far as host name to IP address. And again, I'm only putting A records in for the first 3 Windows servers right now, and later on I'll go back and add the rest. If this were on a domain, uh, if you join this to a domain, you would not have to worry about that because the foundation process would authenticate those VMs to the domain, and then DNS would be updated automatically. So that being said, I just kind of ran through the rest of the wizard, and now we're beginning the foundation process. And I did fast forward through because this does take a little bit more than an hour to complete. So that being said, we got through that. There's the option to activate Windows. We're going to skip that. And now we are going to go into our um, cluster here. Now that it's been foundation for mine, you'll see that we have a nice interface here, which gives you some statistics. It's a nice dashboard interface. But now what we're doing is um, we're launching one of the VMs or the Mine platform, and this is where Veeam is installed. So we'll be able to go in here, and before we launch that, there's some AHV plugins. Again, this Mine appliance also includes a hypervisor, which is the Acropolis hypervisor. We do also support ESX, but in this instance, it's AHV. Obviously, that is a nice benefit because AHV is included at no additional cost. So you get additional value there. So we're just going here. I have an internal repository of files. I'm going to come down and select the Veeam package for AHV. We'll install that. There's a bunch of prerequisites, but really what that's doing is setting up Veeam or the Veeam software to be able to plug in directly to our storage fabric and to create an AHV proxy as well. And it does this all automated, which is really beneficial because number one, it just reduces the total time to deploy, but it really does simplify the operation. So you really don't have to have a lot of background information on Veeam or Nutanix to really get this solution off the ground. So now that that's downloaded and extracted, we'll launch that. It'll take a couple minutes to install the different prerequisites. Doesn't take that long, but again, this is deploying on that one of the VMs that was created during the foundation. All right, so this is just going to wrap up in a moment. Once it's done, just click next, accept. Just let's finish this process. But once this is done, we'll go in and launch the Veeam backup software, and you'll see the repositories, and we'll go ahead and go to infrastructure, and we'll add the cluster in, and then we'll create the Veeam proxy. So just wrapping up here, and just to say that this could all be done manually, but with the foundation process that Nutanix has built to integrate with Veeam, This definitely speeds up the deployment time. And we're just about 10 minutes into this right now, which is pretty amazing, based off of what we got accomplished in 10 minutes, and it's again through that automation that we have built. All right, we're going to go ahead and launch the Veeam backup software. All right, we'll log in. Again, we did not join this to the domain, so we're just using local credentials. Again, we have the DNS records in there, so as we start to build out the uh, the Veeam proxy for AHV, uh, we don't have to do anything there. We've already created that beforehand. All right, so now this is opened up, and if we just jump down to the infrastructure, you'll start to see everything that was built during the foundation process. We have that scale out repository. Again, it was those VMs that were built up at that foundation, and you'll see there's the option for AHV. So now what we'll do is add in the cluster IP address. We will have to have a service account. We created that service account early on, and that was just created inside of the cluster under settings and then authentication. And then we just made this service account a cluster admin, so it has the ability to leverage our APIs and build VMs. So we'll click next. It's already on the default container on the right network. We don't need an IP address here. That's just used for file recovery. We can worry about that later if needed. So now that we have uh, created this new server in Veeam, and that server being the cluster, Nutanix cluster, you can hit next, and it's going to prompt us to create a Nutanix AHV proxy for Veeam. So again, in an automated fashion, we can deploy that right here. We're going to give it a name. Again, this will also be the host name, which we've already created an A record for. So we'll just hit next. We'll choose the default network, but here we're definitely going to want to assign a static IP address because we want it to make sure it matches the IP address that we have in DNS. All right, default gateway, and definitely got to make sure that we check static DNS, and we want to point that to our domain controller, and that was that auto AD that you had seen earlier within the cluster. Again, I use the word siloed, but it's really this is self-contained. I wouldn't say siloed. It's not really the right word because Nutanix, each Nutanix cluster can be managed through a central interface that we call Prism Central. So this is not siloed. This is more isolated, um, meaning that it's a specific cluster for mine, which makes the deployment really easy, really integrated. So now we're going through and deploying that proxy. This will take a few minutes to deploy. I'm not going to speed up the process here. Just let it run its course. It might take a minute or two. And you'll see we're about 14 minutes into this demo video right now, and we're almost done. And once this is finished, we'll be able to start backing up our virtual machines and restoring. All right, you'll see it's uploading the virtual machine image files. That's actually pulling it from a public repository. That's the AHV proxy for Veeam. And it's going to configure it. It's going to look for it, so it's powering it on right now on the cluster. And then it will do a reverse DNS to make sure that it lives in DNS. And once that's finished, we can wrap up this portion of the install, and then we'll be able to launch the the UI for the proxy where we can start to configure our backup jobs. All right, so it's verifying the proxy. Hopefully this will be done in a couple of minutes. All right, now it's getting the proxy IP. And in a few short moments, this should complete. Right now it's doing that reverse DNS lookup, verifying that the A record exists. Now we may get a warning on here, and that's okay. Again, if we're joining this to the domain, that warning wouldn't be there. But what's happening is that when the VM powered up, it had a temporary IP address. It's probably cached somewhere, but eventually that would time out. So it's just going to give us a warning, most likely, that it couldn't resolve it, but it will let us through because it can ping it and it can start the services that need to be started. So just give this a couple more seconds. There's that error right there where it says cannot resolve. But that's not a big deal. If there were a larger problem, it wouldn't let us finish and we'd have to go back and correct the problem. So you'll see I'm just coming in here and just giving it a quick test to make sure that we can ping the IP address, and we can. And doing an NS lookup just to make sure that the A record exists and is correct, and that is as well. And give us a couple more seconds and we should be good. There we go. So we're going to hit next. Let's just check a few things. All right, let's hit next and finish. All right, put in the IP address in Chrome with the port. All right, that looks good. We're going to proceed. And we're going to log in with that service account. All right, we're logged in. And so this is that Veeam proxy, and now we can go ahead and set up a backup job. So I'm going to click Add. And this will be a backup job. We'll give it a name. And we're going to add, we'll drop down, there's that cluster that we added in earlier, and you'll see that the VMs that are not in a protection domain, see them show up, and let's just click that Auto AD and Prism Central. There are two VMs that we have in there. Hit Add, and we'll click Next. There's that scale out repository, so you'll see the capacity that's available there. We're going to run it automatically every hour. We'll take the automatic retry off and we'll keep 5 recovery points. And then we'll go there and finish. And there we go. We're going to start to back up. Now what's nice is because this is, again, an isolated environment, and Veeam is using Nutanix for that scale-out repository, you're getting the benefits of our underlying storage architecture. So you can enable compression, deduplication, erasure coding, and really take advantage of storage efficiencies on Nutanix. So I'm just going back into Prism Element. If you are an existing Nutanix customer, you know what this looks like and what the tremendous value you have within Prism itself as far as managing the entire stack. So you do not lose any of that functionality. Just kind of browsing around here to show you that everything that you've grown accustomed to seeing, within the Nutanix Prism interface is still there. So all we're doing is creating this integration in with Veeam and really branding this as a Nutanix Mine appliance. So that's really all there is to it. We're about almost 20 minutes into this demo, and we've taken a cluster and foundationed it for Veeam, did the entire Veeam deployment with the scale-out repository, and created a backup job. So it's pretty simple, pretty powerful. It definitely beats traditional architecture and legacy 3-tier and the challenges that customers have seen with that. You know, all the benefits of Nutanix in a single appliance that is scale out and ready to go. So I appreciate your time today, and we look forward to hearing from you soon. Thank you very much.